Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, along with David Levin, and our special guest tonight is Southern California sports broadcaster president Chris Roberts, and Chris is the legendary voice in the area, where he went ahead and covered UCLA baseball, basketball, and football. And Chris, welcome back to the broadcast. Glad to have you on.
Hey, I appreciate that, Scott. David, good to talk to you and get to know you a little bit, but it's a pleasure to hang out with you guys, believe me.
We're happy to have you.
Thank you much. I appreciate it.
So anyways, Chris, you have a nice activity that you're going to do after the broadcast. Why don't you let the listeners know that when you trade the cell phone, where are you going? And for those people in northern climates, they're not going to like what we got to say, but all three of us are in warm climates, so we don't frankly care.
Yeah, well, you guys are in Florida, and I'm in sunny Southern California. We were kidding each other before we went on the air about what was going to happen. I said, guys, as soon as we wrap things up, I'm going out in the backyard and jumping the 85-degree pool that's heated. And David said, well, I already hate you. So that's how we started things off. And but we've got some great climate in both coasts right now. We just need to see if we can get this economy cooking.
Yeah, well,
definitely.
David has a lot of vengeance left inside of him, having to deal with me all this time, but that's all right. He's still hanging around, so that's okay. But,
yeah, Chris, we'll talk about that after the show, okay? Well, we'll save that.
There you go.
Call me back while you're lounging in the pool. And by the way, Scott, that's coach speak for hurry up, I want you to get into the water. So let's get this thing started.
Well, we're already started. We're going to get to the meat of this whole thing. And since it is a baseball show, Chris, let's go ahead and talk about some of the big baseball schools in Southern California, because you know what? There's a deep history when you talk about Southern California, USC, UCLA, Cal State, Northridge, and Fullerton, right, Chris?
Yeah, and let's not forget Long Beach State is in there, even UC Riverside. There have been so many terrific players. Justin Turner is a Cal State Fullerton product, the third baseman on the Dodgers, and there's big leaguers all over the National and American League that are from Southern California. And I don't know about you guys, but I am dying for some baseball. I know we're trying to be safe with the virus that spreads in big crowds, and I heard the latest today, the sports news here in L.A., that Major League Baseball is thinking about having 3 10-team divisions to have a shortened season, and using the spring training sites. That'll be very interesting if they can pull something off like that, both in Arizona and in Florida. But I don't think we're the only ones that are dying for the old bat and ball to be hit around the yard and hear it hit some leather and guys making great catches, because this is the time of the year that it should be in full swing. We're a month into the regular season, and we're not watching anybody play because of this terrible pandemic that has hit the world, not just the U.S.
Now, Chris, I know that there have been a lot of different scenarios about resumption of a season, one of which David and I had a good time with a couple weeks ago, right, David? When you had the Grapefruit League, and then you had the Cactus League playing in their respective spring training sites. And again, we had a lot of fun with this broadcast, Chris, when you talk about the different rivalries and then breaking the leagues up and just going with these. I mean, again, in 2020, let's face it, you can experiment with everything on the planet because of unprecedented circumstances. So,
yeah,
when we talk about the potential, you brought up the recent one with the 310 team ones where everybody's geographically situated. Have you had a chance to examine some of the other scenarios along the way, such as the Cactus League versus the Grapefruit League, and now there's another proposal where you have them in Texas? Have you take notice in any of those?
Well, the only thing that I know is that in Arizona, a great place Phoenix to Tucson for spring training baseball.
Right.
But I don't know whether you guys are clued into it or not, but during the summer months, and I'm talking about the ones that are upcoming if they're going to try to play at all in the Arizona, Phoenix, the greater Phoenix area, sometimes these temperatures, Scott and David, can climb up to 115, 116 degrees during the day. And I know you can't have all-night games, but even in the evenings, it can be very, very hot. And where the Diamondbacks play, they play in a facility that has a roof.
Right.
They can shed it if they want to and turn on the air. But not all those fields, which are beautiful complexes around the greater Phoenix area. They don't necessarily have that. And if you're going to play a day game, it's going to be hot. Some of the players are worried about that.
Well, Chris, I lived in Arizona, so I can definitely appreciate where you're talking from. I remember actually spending some time at Phoenix Municipal Stadium and seeing a few AAA games there. So, yeah, you're right. It definitely dry heat, and it gets high. Of course, in Florida, you have the humidity, but, 115, 120 degrees is hot no matter how you slice it, that's for sure. So I can relate to what you're saying. David, would you like to add something?
Sure, and I was listening. Anywhere you go with this play baseball, it's going to be hot. I know that here in Jacksonville, I'm familiar with going to a lot of the minor league games. And there are Saturdays and Sunday day games where it's, upper 90s, maybe 100 degrees, and it's dry heat, and there's no humidity, and there should be, and everybody's literally dying, and you're trying to find, shelter and whatnot. I can only imagine what it's like out in Arizona with just discomfort and just, ick, as my mother would say, it's ick. What do you think when you look at the baseball? I guess we would say the landscape and how they're going about this. Bob Nightingale from USA Today has been real key in publishing a lot of material lately, and so is Jeff Passan from ESPN. Which model do you think is best successful? Should they be staying in their spring training facilities, or do you see them, switching it around? There's going to be realignment. There's the possibility of the DH. Which one do you think works best?
Well, that's a great question. I think somebody's got to really lay out what is going to happen. And I would imagine, I don't know if the Players Association has to vote on it or not to approve it. That could be a stumbling block, but it's going to have to be approved, I would imagine, by the players themselves. It's one thing for the owners to say, hey, we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. And then the next question, are there going to be fans allowed, or is it going to be the social distancing that we've come to know? Everybody has to be at least 6 feet apart because of the safety. But there's a lot of questions to be answered. DH, why not? I think try everything you can to make it as entertaining as possible in both leagues. I can see maybe some hardcore National League staunch supporters said, no, there's no way we're going to have a DH, even if this is a make-up games or shortened season in the year 2020. But I think the bottom line is get back on the ball field somehow, somewhere, some way. And I think that you'd have to have, David and Scott, you'd have to have these teams in their normal facility or any semblance of trying to make things work the way that they had planned it out, because not everybody can play in the nice big air-conditioned stadium there in Phoenix where the Diamondbacks reside. And but I think you're going to have everybody stay in their own facility. That's the only way you could do it, I think, to make it right, because it could become way too complicated to do it in any other way. What do you guys think?
Can I answer that, Scott, and I'll let you jump in? Or
Absolutely,
you want to jump in?
David. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So I'll start with this. I read the report where the governor from Arizona had said that he believed when time was right, and I'm glad he prefaced that that Arizona could take care of all 30 major league teams. I believe there's 12 facilities there plus Chase Field, something like that. So I don't see how that works.
Right. 10 or
in
12.
the same vein, on the Florida side,
right,
there's only so many facilities, and are they going to use Tropicana Field? Are they going to use Marlins Park? Are they going to look at other facilities that are open like Disney's Wide World of Sports? Those things, I guess, have to be entered into the equation. Am I wrong in thinking this is way too complicated? It's become a real cluster, and if they just let 2 or 3 people figure this out and then they go ahead and vote on it, it would be a heck of a lot better.
Scott, you're going to jump in?
Well, yeah, I didn't know if he was asking you that question, but okay, I'll give you my.
I was.
Oh, you got it.
Thank you.
Oh, is David throwing it at me?
Yeah, he was. That's okay.
Anybody that wants to answer it,
let me answer David then. David,
Yeah,
I
please
think you're
do.
absolutely right. You hit it right on the head. It's pretty damn complicated, and especially when you start getting the Players Association involved. The umpires even came out with a statement today, and they've got their union that they're not happy about having to take a pay cut if there's games that are missed, the way that I understood it. So there's a lot of different factors that play into this. And is it going to be complicated? I think absolutely it is. And will that stop it? Could very well be. If there's too many hands in the soup stirring the old pot and the unions go at each other and management can't agree with the Players Association and or the umpires, we can't forget them, it's going to be a real problem. But I think you're right, David. I think it's very, very complicated, and I don't have the answer for it. When I first heard it, I thought, wow, who's going to make this decision to go this way or that way, and then have it really work, because there's a lot of people that have to be consulted for this supply.
Okay. We did a show on this, David, about 2 weeks ago? I mentioned that earlier in the broadcast, right?
Right.
And we did a thing where we broke down, Chris, the teams in the Grapefruit League and the Cactus League. We had each team staying at their own facility, is what we did, and then created rivalries. So, for example, in Florida, you got I-95 with like 5 teams up the road, David. I think we've got the Cardinals and the Marlins in one stadium, the Mets up the road in St. Lucie, and then the Nationals and the Astros there. So you had 5 teams lumped into a corridor, whether it's I-75, 95, whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I like the idea of the Cactus League and the Grapefruit League. And the reason why I do that is, think about it, if you put them all in 30 in Arizona, okay, that's a disadvantage for the Grapefruit teams, because do they actually have their own facilities? Where else would you put them unless you put them in other venue? You know what I mean? Sure, you could get Phoenix Municipal Stadium involved again, and I don't see them going to Tucson. So I think the best thing, me personally, go with the Cactus League and go with the Grapefruit League. That way everybody is in their own facilities. You have their rehab places there as well, and that's where their roots are during the spring. That would make the most sense to me. But to put a Grapefruit League team out in Cactus League where they don't have any facilities of their own, I think would be at a disadvantage to the teams in Florida. I really do.
Would the Cactus League play any games against the Grapefruit League, or you would just stay in your own area for the season and then maybe meet in the playoffs?
There you go, Chris. You just answered my question. Yeah, they play amongst each other in the state. Okay, so Arizona's teams, Cactus League, play one another, and then you go ahead, Grapefruit League play for as many games, and then the playoffs, you figure it out later on. You have dome stadiums in each stadium. I don't know how. I mean, Tampa, St. Petersburg is certainly an option, and then in Miami, the Marlins have their own beautiful park, unfortunately in a bad area, and of course Chase Field out in Arizona. So you have 3 big stadiums later on. So I think that's the only thing that seems to make sense to me, Chris and David. I can't think of anything else. I mean, outside of what you brought up in the initial part of the broadcast, Chris, where you had 10, and 10, with and that's okay if you're playing in the regular ballparks, not in spring training facilities. That's the only thing that's logical about that. You can't do it in Arizona or Florida because you have the travel logistics involved. Now, where does that present a problem for New York? If you're an area with a lot of corona issues, that's a problem. In Detroit, another area, it's a high corona problem. So there's, again, so many external variables as well.
And there's also a lot of it in Miami, too, though. It's everything in South Florida. That's why they're not opening anything. So you have to find a medium, right? Right, guys? And we were talking about this before we went on air. I worry about this stuff just in everyday life. You walk outside, you're wearing the mask or gloves or whatever, and you still don't know what you're going to touch. I'm not sure how this works. I know that there have been players outspoken, that say we don't want to do any of this unless we are 100% sure we're going to be, we're going to be safe. And if you have players that are doubting it, then doesn't that create a problem too? I know that Scott Boras has also gotten his 2 cents in, which I don't think is so great that a representative like that jumps in here and wants to, be the speaker of peace. But I can see this just blowing up in so many directions.
Well, and then the bottom line, too, is you talk about safety for the players. I think they're also concerned about, being in close quarters with each other, showering, sweating, and that has been one of the, and I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but that's been one of the no-nos in the coronavirus. Right. Don't be close to other people in large numbers, and 25 to 30 to 40 guys in a dugout at one time, and in a locker room, that's close quarters. And I understand the concern of the players for that issue in itself, and I don't know how you deal with that. That's a scientific question, and that might be a tough one to solve, guys.
I think so,
That's way above my pay grade.
I mean, your 6-foot distance can occur in a stadium which is empty in spring training, and there's no big deal. You have walkie-talkies or people yelling across a non-noisy facility, Chris, so it's not a big deal. Everybody knows about hand signals. Of course, the Houston Astros took it to a different level, finding every signal on the planet for another day for another show. But there's ways to communicate.
Somehow I knew you were getting that in there.
Oh, of course.
I knew it. You did. I knew you were getting that in there somehow.
I had to. Come on.
Don't leave out the banging on the trash can.
No, I wouldn't do that. Well, no, I figure I'll leave that one for you, Chris. I mean,
Oh, boy.
But, yeah, no. So there's ways to signal a reliever to come on in. Everybody can hear. You can hear a pin drop, but you have one guy on the third base side, one guy below the press box. At some point in an empty ballpark, you can hear it. Of course, you have the bullpen, too. So we can get creative with these things and joke around about them. But the reality is, there's definitely ways that you can get your message across in an empty stadium. But let's not lose sight of the one thing that's important here. MLB has a strong television contract, and that TV money that can get lost is awfully high. Unlike NHL, where they depend on fans being there. College football, they depend on fans being there. MLB, the NFL, they have great contracts, so they need that TV money is what they do. So with that being said, Chris, you obviously live in the number 2 market in the country. You got the revenues lost in SoCal by the Dodgers and the Angels. How devastating and how much do you think those revenues would be knowing the Dodgers and the Angels could draw anywhere between 2.5 to 3 million, if not in case 4 million fans per season?
Well, especially if you spread them out and don't let them all sit together like they've talked about. You're talking about starting a season and using the regular Major League ballparks then? Is that where you're heading with that?
No, not really, Chris. If they don't play baseball at Dodger Stadium or Angel Stadium, then there will be a lot of money lost in revenues.
Oh, absolutely.
That's where I'm going with it, Chris.
Absolutely. And listen, I know that you brought up a great point about TV money. Concessions,
Oh, yeah.
don't let anybody kid you, are huge. And I'm not talking just about Dodger dogs and French fries and high school beer, but all the amenities that go along with the ball caps, the jerseys, etc., that they sell every game. And that is huge. And that loss, I mean, even on the college level, I know at UCLA, there was a magic number of people you had to draw. And after the magic number was met, I think that the net profit cash, and I'm not going to try to give away any figures on what those numbers are, except I will say it was hard, cold cash of sizable figures over that one attendance figure once it was met, and the rest was gravy. So believe me, attendance means a lot on any major sport, and especially college football and basketball, but Major League Baseball, it's huge too.
Well, again, you alluded to it, Chris.
And NFL.
Right. You alluded to it, all the food that's not going to be sold, and the merchandise sales, especially the way they overprice it anyways, is substantial. David, go ahead. Did you have a question?
Yeah, actually, it popped in my head as we were talking about it.
Okay.
We're losing you lose so much money because of the TV revenue and the merchandise and everything that goes on with it. The one thing that I've heard over the last few years is that maybe Major League Baseball has been watered down. There are too many teams. I know they've talked about expansion, but they've also talked about the fact that there's not as much of a competitive balance. You know, you've got the Marlins and the Kansas City Royals and, you know, Pittsburgh and all these teams that are fighting just to try and remain relevant. Does an issue like this, where you're losing millions, does that lead to contraction? Because possibly because we've been talking about, you know, expanding two more teams, so we haven't even, you know, so we balance, you know, both leagues out. Is that possible?
That's a great question. Yeah. I think it is possible. I think the individual cities that would lose a franchise, and if they're really going down the tubes because of not only lack of television revenue, but attendance-wise, and they're ready to lose it anyway, maybe that is a solution. Maybe it's time to cut back. Maybe it's time to. I know they thought about docking the players' money, which does not go over very well with the Players Association.
No, it did not.
But you know, that's a great scenario about contraction, and it probably would help the health of the sport, believe it or not.
Right. Let me ask you this then, because you're in California. If I'm thinking contraction, the first thing I'm thinking is the Marlins, because their attendance is awful. And I know that Derek Jeter is busting his butt to change that with amenities and changing a roster and whatnot. Same token, the San Diego Padres, you know, that's it for San Diego. Those two teams I could see contract. I don't see the Royals doing it because of their long history. I don't see the Tigers doing it because of their long history. So somebody maybe like Tampa Bay and Miami are both out based on attendance?
Well, and I'm thinking West Coast-wise, maybe whether it's Moneyball or not, but maybe Oakland could be a contracted.
Okay, that's true. Yeah, I didn't think of them.
You know, they don't draw very well. And San Francisco, the Giants just fill up the stadium every game.
Right.
That's a tough, David. That's a tough decision. If you're going to say, "Hey, you're out, you're in, you're not going to be around anymore," and it could be. Well, I would not want to be in the position to have to make that decision and watch the fallout.
Yeah, you know, you both bring up an interesting point. Many years ago, I think they tried to contract Minnesota, and there was another team that was on the chopping block. I don't remember which one it was. You know, I know that the Bay Area lost the Raiders to Las Vegas, and even when the Raiders moved to Los Angeles many years ago, San Francisco was able to take over the area. But I think the thing that you have to take into consideration is you have a lot of brand new ballparks that would become white elephants. And I think that when you look at potential contraction possibilities, how would you expect the Marlins to go ahead and contract with a brand new, beautiful stadium there? I don't think that's possible. Are the Rays possibly? I don't think so. I think the Rays ultimately wind up in Montreal down the road, especially as that lease comes to a conclusion. The Oakland A's, I know, have been talked about it, Chris. When you talk about contraction, that's the first one to enter my mind, is because Oakland Alameda Coliseum, or wherever they're calling it these days, is falling apart, and they can't get a building. So then the question is, where would the Oakland A's move? I think that situation ultimately settles itself in the Bay Area. I really do. Gosh, guys, I don't see contraction because, again, I'll reiterate back on my point. What about all these new ballparks that spent millions and billions of dollars to build? You just can't have white elephants there. That's just too difficult to do that.
I agree.
Well, something's got to give.
Yeah.
I agree that Tampa Bay... Sorry. Okay. I agree that Tampa Bay will go back to Montreal at some point, just like we discussed, because you and I, Scott, know what kind of a hassle or, crap fest it is, and excuse the expression, what it is to get a new stadium in that area because of how terrible Tropicana Field is. Maybe I should reiterate that. Go back and reevaluate it. Tampa Bay would be the first one in the American League I would think of. I could see Oakland going too. But because they lost the Raiders, don't you see the community, or at least the constituents and the powers that be rallying around? Well, this is our team, and now we got to support the A's because they're it. I also think San Diego would be in trouble too because they don't draw as much as the other teams in the state of California.
Well, San Diego, the problem you have, David, is they spent a lot of money and they haven't been able to win. I still think San Diego is a viable market since you alluded to it yourself. It's the only game in town. Now, you brought up an interesting point about Tampa Bay. But my gut feeling is the reason that they go to Montreal is, Chris, your man Bob Miller is a legendary broadcaster, right, for Southern California sports broadcasters, right? And he called a lot of great games with the Kings. But everybody knows about the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Montreal Canadiens. How about the Toronto Blue Jays and the Montreal Expos in the same division, creating that original six type of rivalry only in baseball? So that move is inevitable. I'm sorry.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, what do you think, Chris?
Well, you know what? You guys have discussed it before. I had not heard, and it might just be a distance thing across the United States. I hadn't heard about. I knew Tampa Bay was in trouble drawing and trying to even stay afloat money wise. I hadn't heard the move to Montreal, and let's face it, the Expos had some great teams and great players during their run, and I was actually kind of sad to see them disappear. But that's the first I've heard about Tampa Bay, and very, very interesting. Though I'm going to have to suggest that because if that's going to be the decision, like you said, anytime there's contraction, there's going to be upheaval among the people within baseball and even within the respective cities.
I think there'll be more relocation than contraction. Obviously, Los Angeles, Vin Scully's an icon, but you've heard of Ernie Hartwell, right? Remember him? And
absolutely.
And I'll tell you what, Ernie and I, him and I were very, very, very close. And what we always talked about was what wrecked baseball in Montreal was the '94 season when the Expos had a great record. They were headed to the World Series, or at least had a great chance at it. And when the baseball strike crippled it in 1994, that was the end of baseball. When you think of the players they had on that team, Pedro Martinez, and the list goes on, that team could have won the World Series. It really could have and should have. So
that team should have won the World Series, not could have. That should have won the World Series.
Correct. But that stadium there, Chris, out in St. Petersburg is just bad. There was talk that they should have built the one in Tampa. I don't know where they put it now. And then there was a recent proposal, which nobody would even get behind it, is half the games would be played in Tampa, the other half would be in Montreal. They'd have to have new stadiums. If you think that'll happen, then don't hold your breath. Okay, I don't believe
that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. So, but yeah, I know being on the West Coast, Chris, like you are, you're probably not as in tune to certain scenarios on the East Coast. It's no fault of yours. It's just one coast is different than the other. You don't have those kind of issues out there. But to me, for the Rays to go to Montreal to be the Expos and then the Blue Jays, the original 6 hockey rivalry to me is just renewed only on the diamond.
Let me just throw in that I wanted to make mention the fact David had talked about the Padres.
Yeah,
David, I think even if they are the low big league team on the totem pole, I think they're trying. Machado was a big signing for them last year. They've tried to beef up their draft status with some pretty good players coming into the system, and I understand about the drawing power, but one thing we know for sure, if you start winning, the people come out. And the Padres, back in the day of Steve Garvey playing for the Padres and et cetera, when they were drawing pretty good crowds, I think that it's a franchise that's still trying very, very hard. I don't think they're sitting on their hands and collecting TV money and not worried about attendance. I think that they're a little bit stronger than what might seem on the national level. That's just my opinion. I'm not trying to stick up for them, but I don't think that they're a patsy on the West Coast as far as Major League Baseball.
And that kind of goes to what Scott just said. We don't know. I personally don't know enough on the West Coast. Sure, there. So it's the same scenario. I guess I'm a purist. I'm a National League purist. I don't believe in the DH. I want to see everybody grind it out, and it's going to bother the hell out of me if I see the Cubs using the DH to when I want to see a pitcher pitching. But there are just certain things ingrained, and you always had the haves and the have-nots, and this new, whatever you want to call it, realignment, this reconstruction, this whatever you want to call it, I think it's going to create a lot of excitement. But there has to be a balance, and I don't see that happening yet. I can't.
Yeah.
At least and maybe that's just my mind being cluttered because I've read so much in the last few days.
Yeah, Chris.
No, you bring up some good points, and I didn't mean to make that Padre.
No, that's fine.
Stand out. It's just that there have been some workings behind the scenes and management, and acquisition of players, and I'll tell you what, some of the most fun I've had going to a game has been there at Padre game in downtown San Diego. It's a great venue, and are they there yet? No. Do they have the money that the Dodgers and Angels have? No. But I think I hate to use the word trying. I guess I didn't say that earlier. But I think they're giving it their best shot to try to. They know that they're not number 2 behind the Dodgers and Angels, but I think they're pretty solid number 3.
Hey, Chris, I have no problem with you using the word trying with the Padres because they are. And number 2, I know that for myself. I mean, listen, it's not like they've never been to a World Series before. I mean, let's face it, they lost in '84 to the Tigers, and they lost to the Yankees, so it's not like they've never been there. They've tried to bring in some high-profile players, unlike the Tampa Bay Rays or the Miami Marlins, where, although I got to give the Rays credit, they do a good job with player development, but, they're always willing to, from a TV revenue standpoint, they'll milk it, and their payrolls are traditionally near the bottom. The Oakland A's the same thing, but no, I've got no problem. I think that's the appropriate word, Chris, trying. The Padres really are. Now, when you look at, other organizations, that aren't trying, then there's a bit of a problem there. There really is. But and you know what? I love the West Coast. I've lived on the East Coast the majority of my life, but I've spent time in Phoenix, and I've gone to L.A. numerous times, so I can appreciate, to me, what both ends. And I told you I have a vested interest in L.A. now being a part of the Southern California Sports Broadcasters, and I expect to make that trip annually when things get back to normal. And I've gotten to know a lot of the people on the West Coast. You know, the Dodgers have always been great when they were here in Vero Beach, and you know, a common friend that we both know, Tim Mead, that David could very well get to know, is the president of the Baseball Hall of Fame. So, you know, the West Coast thing is very real, and to me, I think that, you know, baseball belongs in every particular place, including Oakland, because I do really believe, guys, that they will rally around it, because Oakland and San Diego will have something in common. They're the only games in town.
Let me just say this real quick.
Sure.
The Jacksonville Suns used to be the AA affiliate for the Dodgers, and this kid named Kershaw was just amazing here, throwing heat to the AA affiliate. I just want to say that I knew him before he was Kershaw. So, yeah, the Dodgers are well linked here, too, in the past. The best thing that I think that we're doing tonight is we're talking about the sport we love. And all three of us are showing passion for it. We're showing that we're passionate about it. You know, Scott and I cover football, and that's our major gig. But there's nothing greater than sitting at a ballpark and eating a dog and drinking a beer and watching a baseball game. And, you know, my 20-year-old, Don Levin, he's a left-hander, and I never taught him to pitch. And now he lets me remember that. But anyway, there's such a purity about what we're talking about. It's cathartic to be able to talk about it. I miss seeing the game so much.
Well, you know,
we really do. We hit it on the head, David. We miss it desperately, and the sooner the better it can come back. I know we want to be safe, but you hit on a lot of good points, and it just does not feel like spring approaching summer without some baseball being played.
I think what's so nice about tonight, guys, is our first broadcast was the Sports Exchange, and I had Rick Curdy and David Vino Hodges, who both live in North Carolina. You know what the theme of that show was? It was Major League Baseball going to Charlotte. And for us to be able to do something different, because I'm sick and tired of hearing about all this stuff about when they're coming back, I decided to get creative tonight by talking about Major League Baseball in Charlotte. And now we're following it up with Major League Baseball, you know, on the West Coast in L.A., Arizona, including all the different scenarios. So it's really nice to have back-to-back broadcasts talking about the great American pastime and not have to deal with about who's coming back when and what circumstances. And that's what's made tonight a really enjoyable night on the front end and on the back end. It really has been. And I really enjoyed putting these two broadcasts together with four great people.
Thank you so much.
You did a good job, Scott. Really, it's been impressive the way you put it together, and it's been a lot of fun.
So, David, do you have any other questions outside of baseball you'd like to ask Mr. Roberts?
So now I need to change tunes? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, not really. We can talk baseball, but there's no way we can knock the fact that Mr. Roberts was an iconic basketball broadcaster.
I know.
We can't forget about football either, right, Chris?
No, I know. I got to tell you a funny story, Chris. That Scott and I are talking about you know, earlier in the week, and I'm sorry about earlier in the week that we had to, you know, change plans. But he's telling me all about, you know, I've already done some of my research on you and whatnot. We're doing pre-programming. He goes, he's a pretty big deal. And I'm like, I know. And he's listing all your accolades. He's talking about, you know, what you've done. And I'm shaking my head, and I know he can't see it. Okay, so I'm just going to ask. You are iconic in terms of college sports and UCLA and baseball and football and basketball and all this. When you look at it on a grand scale, especially now, how much does it bother you that all these athletes, whatever sport it was, are not getting to do what they love in the spring? I mean, it's the same thing on the East Coast, but I was curious what your thought was.
David, I've told my wife this, my son, my daughter, and my close friends. If I was an active broadcaster right now, I think I'd be going through the roof. This whole thing leaves a real bitter taste in my mouth. I always looked at the 23 years that I was at UCLA. Every single day, not just season, but every day I cherished. I mean, I really loved the job. 23 spectacular years. We had some really good teams that were always in the playoffs and went to the big bowls and finally won a baseball national championship. But it really bothers me because I always looked at my job just like an athlete would at his job. Because I know there's athletes right now that are sitting on the fence borderline whether their career is over or whether they're going to go ahead. But they're missing time right now. And that's time that'll never, ever be recaptured. I always looked at that the same way with the broadcasting gig. If you're missing time, and thank God I never had to, it's never going to come back. And I feel bad for the guys that are making a living broadcasting games. I mean, from AAA to AA to the big leagues to the NFL, college, big Division I schools, basketball, you name it. I feel bad for them because they're never going to get this time back again. It's going to leave, and we don't know what the future holds. But like an athlete, it's gone forever, and it's time to really cherish, right? I should say all the time that I was doing it, I cherished every single moment. And I feel bad, not only for the broadcasters, but especially the athletes, because some of them are not going to come back from this, whether it's a NBA player, National Hockey League skater, or a NFL player, or a pro baseball player. Some guy's going to get left out, and it's going to be because of this. And, you lose those skills so easily as you age, and it's unforgiving in sports the way that they move people in and out if they don't perform anymore.
That's true. It's amazing. We talk about Clayton Kershaw, and you know what I love about, I've never taken this drive, but pretty close to it, is, to get to LA is very easy from Jacksonville. All you got to do is take I-10. Of course, you have to get through 20 hours of Texas, too, and then everything else in between. So if you have a long time and want to spend 3 hours on I-10 to go from Jacksonville all the way to L.A., you can do it, David, so you know the way to L.A. I always used to like the song, do you know the way to San Jose? Well, I know the way from Jacksonville to Los Angeles, I-10, so what can I tell you?
No, yeah, it's I was listening to everything you were saying, Chris, and I have this image in my head because one of the broadcasters for the Jumbo Shrimp here in Jacksonville is a friend of mine, and thank goodness he and his wife just had a child, because I think he would probably be going stir crazy right now.
Oh yeah,
because he's not doing what he loves, and I love Scott. His name is Scott, and I love our dad, and we're real good friends. But for these minor league broadcasters, they're really going nuts because we still don't know what's going to, and that's another show, by the way. We really don't know what's going to happen with the minor leagues because of all
right.
that.
Yeah, right.
And that is another show, Scott. We'll have to touch on that at some point. Sure. But it's not inconceivable that the Marlins are going to play this season, the Dodgers are going to play this season, whoever's going to play this season, and these minor leaguers aren't going to get their chance to come back to the show.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. So I feel bad. And they're going to have the 10-round Major League Baseball draft. What is that going to do? There's just going to be a hell of a lot of free agents, and there's going to be they had it.
It's going to be very interesting how it unfolds. I feel bad already for the people that are going to be left on the wayside, whether they're broadcasters and especially athletes, because we're going to sit back, we're going to watch it, it's going to happen, unfortunately.
Right.
David, you have any more questions for Chris?
I'm good. I really am. I'm really enjoying this, but I'm tapped out for right now because we've covered everything.
So, Chris, why don't you?
But let me ask this. I want to ask this to David. How about for you, writing? Which is your God-given ability to do. How about for you and your job, not covering baseball per se right now? It's got to be rough for you too.
It's rough, but I will say this: I cover football and baseball, and I'm blessed to be able to cover both. My production this last month has just been god awful, and my editors let me know it, but it's across the board. The fact that we have gotten at least this hope that it's going to start again, we're now producing more. But there was a good 3 weeks where we weren't doing anything. And
sure.
It looked grim, but now there's some hope. I'm right in the middle of it because we're talking about the Marlins and the minor league team here in town. So there's enough to cover. I'm fortunate that way. The Jaguars,
good.
even though the Jaguars are going to probably stink it up again, they had a draft. So the city itself is giving me stuff to write about. For other people, I'm sure it's miserable. If you're the only game in town, like certain cities, it's rough, and my heart goes out to everybody for that.
Well, we had a columnist, feature writer, Carl Erskine. I don't know if you've ever heard of him for the Times, but he announced today that that's it for him for the LA Times, and he won't be back.
Really?
And one of my favorites from Scribe's standpoint, my wife's too, and it'll be sad. I hope something happens that he's not going to be out of it completely, but he won't be with the LA Times anymore, which I think is sad.
It's amazing. Back in Detroit, Chris, there's a guy by the name of Pat Caputo who used to write for the Oakland Press. His job ended after 37 years. Thankfully, though, he's actually involved. He has a radio show, and he does a lot of on-air work as well, so he's fortunate there. But
Good.
37 years in one place. I think one of the things that's challenged us a little bit here at the South Florida Tribune is, we get a lot of our content from out sources. And even when we were, I've set this thing up where we got like 29 or 30 organizations sending us material, and we have some occasional writers. What I've actually done to try to keep the momentum going on social media is Candy gets everything up there, but what I try to do is space it out on social media so that way we have things constantly going up. If it's a day or 2 or 3 old, I don't worry about it. Just get it up there. That way we're able to stay in the constant flow of things. You know what I mean, Chris? So
Sure.
And that's good for a lot of people. You don't like to live that way if you can help it, but the word resourcefulness is something you've really got to do or you're in trouble. You really are. And I think this during a time like this, Chris, this tests our resolve. I actually wrote a story for the South Florida Tribune today, actually, called the Pandemic Challenge, which I'll have it up on social media. And I've tried to look at places like ESPN or different places that are struggling with the content and trying to come up with ideas how I can make our network better, is what I've tried to do. And that's what I'm going to keep doing, is just scouting, as we all do. And when you see your contemporary struggling, and you really do, then it means that that's when you really find out what you're really made of, Chris. And I think that, anybody can talk about Tom Brady and overkill his time at Tampa Bay. I don't really care. The story gets old after a while. But there's how many times have you had to improvise on the fly when things weren't going your way?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm pulling for the broadcasters in the minor leagues, the kids that are coming out of college, that are trying to make a name for themselves. A great little story the other day that you both might have seen was unnamed general manager talking to a real high draft choice in the NFL draft and said, you're going to be part of the group, and the bonus is $1,000. And the kid says, well, I've got 200 right now. By the time I get to camp, I'll have the balance of it for you.
Really?
The GM says, well, wait a minute. we're paying you. You're not paying us. But I thought it was a great story of the little guy trying to make it into the big
great story.
scene, and he thought he had to pay, but it was the other way around. But listen, we need to have the nuts and bolts, the people that are down in the trenches, get back to work again, and I'm just praying that it's going to work out for all of us, because we've got to have them solidified to make this thing work and move out from where we're at right now, because it's not good.
So, Chris, I have a question for you. You talked about Justin Turner earlier in the broadcast, but can you tell me some of the best players in college that went to the big leagues, since obviously Southern California is a sports hotbed? And you don't even have to restrict it to college. Let's just talk about the best amateur prospects that came out of Southern California in your mind that made it to the big leagues, that made names for themselves.
Well, Justin Turner, like I said, with the Dodgers is, Cal State Fullerton product, and came up as kind of a banjo hitter, turned himself into a power hitter. The story for him is just fantastic. I don't have a list in front of me of all the kids that came out of the local schools. Gary Carter, who played catcher for Montreal, was one of the great big leaguers, went to high school right here in the area down the freeway. Aaron Rowland, who just finished up a career at the San Francisco Giants, played center field, played in 2 World Series, one with center fielder, played with the Philadelphia Phillies and the Chicago White Sox, and had his best years with those 2 teams. San Francisco wasn't the greatest scenario for him, but he's from right here in the town that I live in, Glendora, is where he played his high school ball. And, I could go on with some more players that, Trevor Bauer, UCLA, who's now making a name for himself in the big leagues. And it's a loaded hotbed, a lot like Florida, or anywhere down south, even in Texas, where kids play baseball almost year-round now.
Right.
And the scouts are out here trying to snatch them up and put them on a 40-man roster if they can, and hope they develop, because the competition is tough when you make that 25-man roster in the dugout.
Well, don't lose sight of the fact you've had some incredible coaches at USC and UCLA. I mean, Lentulus, I think Rod Dado was one over at Southern Cal, if I'm correct on that. 10
national championships, and Rod Dado's son, Justin, it's his membership that allows us to have all of our Southern California sports broadcasters meetings at Lakeside Golf Course.
Right.
But Rod Dado, the best in college sports. He's a John Wooden of NCAA baseball with those 10 national championships. And Ron Fairley, who played in the big leagues, played for Dado, played for the Dodgers, is one gentleman that sticks out in my mind. Eric Karros, who played at UCLA, the all-time home run leading hitter in Dodger history, believe it or not, in L.A., played at UCLA. Now he's one of the best broadcasters, I think, on radio and television, Eric Karros. And those are just a few more names that have come out of the area. Tim Wallach, great Montreal Expo, played at Cal State Fullerton for Augie Garrido. And what a terrific third baseman he was, too, in Major League Baseball. So there's quite a few guys that you could just keep naming them one right after another,
right,
that grew up and had their roots right here in SoCal.
No doubt about it. I mean, UCLA, you obviously broadcasted UCLA baseball for a long time. Nobody better to talk about UCLA.
Troy Glass.
Yeah.
Troy Glass, who went to the Angels and hit his share of home runs, was the shortstop on UCLA's playoff team that went to Omaha, and just these names keep popping out at me.
That's okay. They will. Again, you have a hotbed for a lot of great names. Why wouldn't they? I mean, nobody can ramble them off the top of their head, but certainly as they jog your memory, you're able to do that.
Yeah.
And so there's no doubt about it that you've covered three major sports. You have football on your resume, you have basketball on your resume, and baseball. And you've always told me in the past that you don't have any favorite sport except game or the sport except the one that you're calling. I think that's a lesson that every young broadcaster should learn anyways. They really should. You focus on what you're doing at that moment. If there are any young broadcasters that want to know anything about us, contact us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com, and I'll be more than happy to go ahead and pass on your questions to Chris or whatever the case may be. But, again, Chris, I am a proud member of Southern California Sports Broadcasters, and I'll continue to be until I stop breathing. So that's all I can tell you. So.
Well, we've been around now since, believe it or not, 1958. Tom Harmon was the first president of SoCal Sports Broadcasters. So it's not like we just started up, and I'm very proud to be a 50-year president of SoCal Sports Broadcasters. And we've got a lot of Ben Scully is an original member of the organization and the only one that's still alive now. God bless him. It fell down the other day, and he said, listen, I'm okay. I went down head first because I never did like sliding head first.
Right.
I'm going to be okay. And God bless him. Like I said, he's one of the original members of SoCal Sports Broadcasters. And we're just hoping we can get cleared so we can at least have a board meeting to have at least 10 people get together with social distancing so we can figure out where in the world we go on from here with the organization and those sports. This year it's been a little rough. We had the broadcast crew of Oral Hershiser and Joe Davis were supposed to be with us about a month ago for our initial lunch in the baseball preview, and that did not happen. But we're going to keep on trucking. Thanks for mentioning SoCal Sports Broadcasters. Good to have you as a member, Scott. And, let me just say it's good to know Candy working the controls. I know she didn't feel very good. Your wife not long ago. Good to have her back and at it. This is the best sound that I've had since I've been on with you, and I'm going to credit it to her. Great audio, and been able to hear you guys. And David, I know your pop was under the weather. I hope everything is going to be okay with him. But
I appreciate it.
A lot of. Yeah, no, listen, that's my pleasure, David. I wish you both the best and good health. And Scott, thanks for having me on, pal. I appreciate it. And David. Good to visit with you, too.
All right, just a couple more things.
Thank you much.
We have about a minute or two to go, Chris, if that's okay with you real quick. When I do make my return to Southern California, I am so excited that I won't be going into it cold turkey the next time, you know what I mean? It'll be it'll be easier for me to go ahead and meet a lot more people, you know what I mean? It's always tough when you go to an event for the first time cold turkey, you know what I mean? But now at least I have met a few members, and the continuous communication that we've had has been really great. So I'm really excited about the next trip. I really am. And
we are going to make sure that you get introed the right way during the event, and people know who in the heck you are. And It's good to have a member on the East Coast.
Well, I'm so proud to be, Chris, beyond anybody's wildest imagination. David, before we get off the air, do you want to promote yourself real quick before we sign off?
Sure, why not? I really enjoyed this, guys. Seriously.
Right.
There's something about the purity of baseball that at times brings me close to tears. And there is crying in baseball when you love something and you're that passionate about it. It's been an amazing experience. Anyway, you can find me on fansided.com. I cover the Miami Marlins at Marlin Maniac, and then I cover the Jacksonville Jaguars at Black and Teal. I can be found on Twitter at EM719907. And take it away, Scott.
Oh, okay. And we know we've given Chris his due, the president of Southern California Sports Broadcast. And not like I was looking for another reason to get it on there, right, Chris? Okay. But you can... but I did. But nonetheless, you can
Thank you.
You're welcome. But
He's
can,
not going to say no to the promotion. How about that?
Oh, what the heck. Until I lose my voice, we're in trouble.
There you go, David.
But anyways, just to let you guys know how you can reach us, you can reach out to me on Twitter. It's Scoop with 5 3s. The one you guys know better about, Chris, is at Tribune South on Twitter. People can follow my YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune. And you can find us on Facebook under South Florida Tribune. Like the page. Chris and I got in contact together on LinkedIn, and that's when our friendship started. And of course, we have an Instagram account under South Florida Tribune as well. Want to get as many out there, and please go to www.southfloridatribune.com. You'll see all the content, the broadcasts on there as well. So once again, on behalf of David Levin and Chris Roberts, I want to thank you very much for being a part of the broadcast tonight. And everybody have a good weekend, and we'll continue to do better the next time. Good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.